everyone, Driven is back, powered by Petronas Primax. This is the episode you've all been waiting for, featuring the new Perodua Myvi.
We've already reviewed this car in full detail when it first launched late last year. In short, it's a massive improvement over the old model.
But the question is, should this really be the default small car for all Malaysians? We've lined up two of its closest rivals to settle it once and for all. The Proton Iriz was designed from the get-go as Proton's answer to the all-popular Myvi. While it has completely missed the mark in terms of sales, we think it's still one of Proton's best products to date, and it's going to be interesting to see how the latest refined version stacks up against Perodua's new Myvi.
The second alternative isn't from a Malaysian brand, but from Kia. The all-new Picanto may be from a smaller class, but it packs a lot of impressive features into its small frame. And the best part is, it's priced to go head-on with the two local models.
As for the Myvi, there isn't really much left that hasn't been said. It's already racking up the sales, with Malaysians buying them by the thousands every month. Now that many buyers can't be wrong, can they?
Trust me, this is going to be the definitive video if you're choosing between these three cars.
We'll be comparing all the vital aspects from performance, ride and handling, practicality, refinement, safety, specs, as well as quality.
Of course, the all-important detail, which is how much these cars cost when you go to the fuel pumps, will be answered as well. Everything you'll ever need to know about these three cars, you'll find out today.
So Matt, take it away.
Well guys, I've been dying to say this. Welcome to Driven 2018. Now, cue the music.
The third generation Myvi is all new inside and out, giving the nameplate a fresh new image since the 2005 original. The winning formula hasn't changed much, so it's still a practical, dependable and most importantly, affordable car for many Malaysians. The top spec 1.5 advanced model with all the bells and whistles is priced at a reasonable 55,300 ringgit. That's less than the old one.
The Iriz 1.6 Premium, meanwhile, is a little bit more expensive at just under 56,000 ringgit. The car Proton launched in 2014 was certainly a head-turner, but crucially it was flawed in many areas, so it wasn't the game-changer the company had hoped it would be. It has taken Proton a long time to perfect its Myvi fighter, but it has now been significantly refined under the skin.
Believe it or not, the Kia Picanto is the most affordable car here, dipping below the 50,000 ringgit mark. Now in its third generation, the Picanto hasn't grown by much, but it has matured into a much more accomplished product with a more mainstream appeal. Like the Iriz, there's high hopes placed on this model, as it's supposed to account for 50% of Kia's total sales in Malaysia.
Now as usual, we'll start off with looks. Now 99.9% of the design of the Myvi was done locally, and I love what they've come up with. I like the body kit and I also like the design of the 15-inch wheels. But there's one thing that I don't get, which is the lack of LED DRLs. Now even the highest spec model doesn't come with it. If I was a designer designing a car for the Malaysian local market, I would definitely have them on. But maybe Perodua is keeping them for the facelift model. Now the overall good looks continues to the back, especially with this integrated rear spoiler and the wide bumper inserts. But there is one thing though, the body kit which comes with the car does not extend to the rear bumper.
The Iriz, well, it looks just like the older Iriz, save for new black highlights on the roof, here, as well as on the grille, which also gets a nice 3D Proton emblem. Well, it's just too bad Proton didn't give this a proper visual facelift. In terms of looks, I don't think the Iriz is particularly eye-catching, but you know what they say, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But I must say one thing though, now that the Myvi has dropped its tall hatchback proportions for a more modern and matured look, kind of makes this car look a little bit outdated, don't you think?
On looks alone, the Kia Picanto would be my pick because it just looks so funky and fresh, and the LED DRLs look absolutely gorgeous here. One more thing, the color options available on this car is a lot more interesting than the other two cars. But on the other hand though, it's kind of spoiled by this whole low spec look of it with the small wheels and body colored door pillars. As for the back, well, it really does remind you of the Perodua Azia, doesn't it? But on the inside, there's no mistaking this for a Perodua because it just looks so unique. The Picanto may look low spec on the outside, but it doesn't from inside here because of this big touchscreen. And other than the fact that the side aircon vents feel a little bit cheap to operate, the rest of the cabin has impressive build quality, especially for the money. It's all hard plastics, of course. I mean, you have to be dreaming to expect any sort of soft touch here. But the fit and finish feels far better than the other two local cars. And the leather steering wheel especially, which I think is very, very important because it's the only thing you touch all day, feels of a higher quality compared to the other two cars. If there's one complaint, it's this fabric seats. But then again, I think good fabric is much better than fake leather.
Well, the leather on the Myvi is not so bad, but I do feel that the steering wrap, well, it could have been done better. But overall, the design of the dashboard is very nice. I feel that it is the best dashboard design that Perodua has ever come up with. And the center area over here, it's a bit more driver focused, and the dual layered design gives it a bit of a modern touch. Personally, I don't really like this airbag cutout over here. Kinda looks out of place, but there's good reason for it. Now, if let's say you get into an accident and the airbag deploys, after that you need to replace the entire airbag, and you'd only need to change this area of the dashboard. You don't need to change the entire dashboard, which can be very expensive. Now, overall, considering everything in terms of quality, I feel it's very decent at that price point. And if you compare it with the Proton, I feel it's better too.
Yes, Proton build quality. It's actually not as bad as you think here, and it is definitely better than older Proton models. The textured plastic they use here look alright, and it doesn't feel too cheap if you touch on them hard. The thing is, it's still not as polished as the Myvi and especially the Picanto, and if you look hard enough, you're gonna find a few misaligned panels. As for the design itself, I honestly think it's alright. There's a newfound sense of symmetry which I like, and you know, the all black scheme here looks much better than the older Persona's half black, half grey approach. Now, for the seats itself, I think it's one of the best Proton has made. There's enough lumbar support and thigh support, but I think larger individuals are gonna find it a little bit too corsetting. On the bright side, you've got Martini racing stripes. How cool is that?
Now let's talk about the rear accommodation, and I've got to tell you that the Myvi wins in this department. The legroom is the biggest, and the center hump over here is also small and very less intrusive. And the best part of everything, which is something that I really love, is this. You can recline the backrest.
The Proton is definitely smaller in the back here with just about enough legroom for adults. But then again, it has shapelier, more comfortable seats which can be very crucial for long distance journeys. And it's definitely better than the Myvi's flat bench.
As for the Picanto, well, there's no escaping the fact that it's from a whole class smaller. It's really tight back here, and it's also far narrower than the other two, so you can forget about fitting 3 adults in the back here. As for the seats themselves, I've had flat park benches that are more comfortable than this. This lack of space continues to the boot too, rated at 255 litres. It'll fit no more than one big bag, and the load lip is unnaturally high too. Surprisingly, however, this is not the smallest boot here.
That inglorious honour falls to the Iriz with just 215 litres of space. In the real world, it's not as tiny as it sounds, and you can always fold the rear seats for extra space. But if you want to travel with 5 on board plus all their luggage, this isn't the car for you.
And that's precisely where the Myvi comes in. With 277 litres, it has the largest boot here with the widest and deepest cargo bay by far. Simply put, if practicality is your biggest concern, get the Perodua Myvi. Now, there are more reasons to get the Perodua Myvi. For example, the 1.5 litre dual VVTi engine that's positioned up front. It is not the exact same engine that's found in the Toyota Vios, but it's from the same family, and in fact, it's built at the same place in Seremban. If you drive this car back to back with the old one, you would notice that this is a much smoother car to drive. Especially the 1.5 litre engine, it feels stronger, and driving past the national speed limit is not a problem. It doesn't feel like it's going out of breath, and it's also a big improvement compared to the 1.3 litre as well. Compared to the other two here, the Myvi 1.5 falls in the middle in terms of engine outputs. It makes 102 horsepower and 136 Newton meters of torque, while the Proton's bigger 1.6 litre motor offers 107 horsepower and 150 Newton meters of torque. The 1.2 litre Picanto is naturally the weakest one here with just 83 horsepower and 122 Newton meters.
All that translates directly into actual performance. We recorded a 0 to 100 time of 11.3 seconds for the Iriz, which is slightly quicker compared to 11.5 seconds for the Myvi. With a 13.5 second time, the Picanto is a whole 2 seconds behind the two more powerful cars. So yes, the Iriz is the fastest car here. Say what you want about Proton's Cam-Pro engines, but this latest VVT version is actually pretty good. All the vibration from before is mostly gone now, and it feels really good when you plant your foot down. Some of you may or may not want to believe this, but Proton's engines aren't as old school as some of you might have been led to believe. Its power advantage more than makes up for the extra weight, which in this case is nearly 200 kilograms more than the Myvi and Picanto. But the good news is, you don't really feel it from behind the wheel.
13.5 seconds may feel like an absolute eternity getting from 0 to 100, but I'll tell you what, the Kia Picanto doesn't feel all that slow. It helps that it's the lightest car here, dipping under 1 ton, so even with just a 1.2 litre engine, it does not feel all that underpowered like how, the Perodua Asia does. Unless you compare these three cars back to back, you will not feel the power deficit of the Kia Picanto. I mean, none of these three cars are performance cars anyway, so they don't have to feel like a GTI to drive. As a city car, the Kia Picanto is more than powerful enough. One big advantage for the Kia is its transmission. It may only have a 4-speed automatic, but it's the best one here. It upshifts very, very smoothly, far better than the Myvi, and as soon as you flick your right foot down, it reacts very quickly with the downshift, and off you go. There's very little of that lag, annoying delay that you get in the other cars. I've always maintained that having a 4-speed auto, there's nothing wrong with that, as long as it's done right. And this is the perfect example of that. I mean, yeah, it sounds a little bit lame just having 4 speeds, but if it works, it works.
Now the 4-speed automatic in this Myvi is not as good though. It hasn't changed much really compared to the original Myvi from 13 years ago. The performance is a bit old school, it's a bit clumsy. For example, if you're driving uphill, it tends to hold gear longer than it should. Or when you are driving and you give it a bit more gas, it tends to downshift roughly to a lower gear and high revs. And overall, when you compare it with the 4-speed automatic on the Kia Picanto, it is not as smooth.
So where does that leave the Iriz with its punch CVT then? Well, it's hard to say really, because on one hand, it's a massive improvement over the older model. You no longer get a 1.5 second delay when you want to accelerate, but it's down to half a second now, so it's much quicker and much responsive as well. But on the other hand, it's not as direct or immediate as a conventional automatic. A lot of people seem to think that CVTs are more modern than torque converters, but in this case, I much rather prefer the 4-speed automatic over this any day of the week. On the bright side though, the Iriz still has the best ride and handling package here, which is expected of Proton, really. It's a real joy to drive, especially through the corners. The steering wheel itself might be electrically assisted and might be a little bit too big for my liking, but hey, it has the best feel in this group. Simply put, if you enjoy driving, the Iriz is the only car here that's actually any fun to drive.
Now the thing is, fun driving may be important to people like you and me, enthusiasts, but for your everyday driver, all you want is a car that's reliable for you to drive from point A to point B, and the Perodua Myvi does that perfectly well. So overall, it is not a car that you can have a lot of fun with when you're driving behind the wheel, but if you're just like any other driver, it's perfectly fine, and Perodua knows this well.
The Picanto falls right in between the other two cars. It's not as enjoyable to drive as the Iriz, not by a long shot, but on the other hand, it's not as numb as the Myvi either. And it strikes a really good middle ground, I think, and the way it handles will impress pretty much everybody, whether you like driving or not. It just feels so effortless, so secure, so nimble, and yet so relaxing to drive. Better yet is just how comfortable the Kia is. This may only be an A segment hatch, but it has the best ride here. It's the only one to have that coveted big car feel, especially in the way it handles low speed bumps. It doesn't rock you about so much, it just stays solid and stable. As far as ride comfort is concerned, this is nothing short of outstanding.
Now, as much as we would like to talk about our two local car makers have reached global standards, the difference in ride here really proves otherwise. Basically, our two B segment hatchbacks can't even match a true world-class A segment, that is the Kia. Now, it is not to say that the Perodua Myvi is not a comfortable car, because it is. In fact, to most drivers, they would find this perfectly acceptable. The thing is, it has a bit of a stiff suspension setup, but the bump absorption is good and it's better than the previous model. Overall, it is a more controlled car, but the thing is, when you compare it against the Kia Picanto, it feels like it's one class below, where technically it's supposed to be the other way around.
The Proton Iriz fares slightly better in this aspect as the ride feels a little bit more sophisticated than the Myvi. It's not as great as the Picanto though, which is a shame, but it's still impressive in its own right. Those who have never tried or sat in any Protons before should really experience it for yourself to see how far Proton has come. What I'm most impressed about this car is its refinement. The older car was loud, you can hear the engine, the transmission drone, and the vibration. It was just reverberating throughout the entire car. But all that's gone now, because the engineers have revised the positions of the engine mountings, and it also has a brand new exhaust system. You'd be surprised by how all these little things make the car so much better. In fact, we measured that the Proton is the quietest car here under full throttle, as we recorded a maximum noise level of just 71 decibels compared to 72 decibels for the Kia Picanto and 77 decibels for the Myvi. Now, who would have guessed that?
Perodua's having a vocal engine is more like a brand characteristic now. But having said that, it is still significantly better than the previous model. And when it comes to idling, it is still quieter than the Proton as well because it does not have a loud fan. Now, Malaysian traffic being the way it is, that counts for a lot.
The Kia, meanwhile, is even quieter still at idle. We recorded a maximum of 43 dB at a standstill. That's a full 5 dB less than the Iriz and 3 dB under the Myvi. If you understand sound levels, that's a big difference. The same story goes for steady cruise too. We recorded a maximum of 69 dB for this car at 110 km per hour, while the other two cars are slightly louder at 71 dB. Combine that with this car's impressive ride, and surprise, surprise, the cheapest, smallest car here is the most refined, most comfortable car in this group. To measure fuel economy, we tested the cars with Petronas Primax, the winning formula that keeps the Mercedes-AMG Petronas Formula 1 team winning time and time again. Designed to deliver on track and on the road, this is truly advanced Formula 1 engineering, available at the nearest Petronas station.
Over everyday driving conditions, the Proton Iriz averaged 12.4 kilometers per litre. Surprisingly, the smaller and lighter Kia Picanto only fared marginally better at 13.6 kilometers per litre. Best of all was the Perodua Myvi, which managed to return 14.3 kilometers per litre, or a good 15% better than the Iriz.
Alright, before we wrap up, we're going to take a look at each other's cars to see the 5 things that we like or don't like about them. Matt's going to start with the Kia Picanto first, so do your worst, man.
Right, let's do this! I think it's a shame that we don't get the sportier GT line package because that looks so much better, and the optional Novus body kit that we get is not nice because it's really ugly. But it does get full Apple CarPlay and Android Auto support, making it the cheapest car in Malaysia to get this. I think that's awesome. Too bad though that there's only one USB charging port available, and it's the only car here that doesn't offer any for the rear passengers. On the flip side, it is the only one of the lot to come with rear disc brakes. Now, I know it's not going to do much in terms of stopping power for a car this size, but it does look nice, right? And lastly, the warranty. All 3 cars here come with 5 years warranty, but only Kia offers it with unlimited mileage. The other 2, on the other hand, are limited to 150,000 kilometers.
Now, as part of the 2017 refinement updates, Proton removed quite a few things, one of them being automatic headlights. Why? Now onto the inside, the steering wheel feels a little bit too big, so it gives you that feeling that it is not nimble. Now, Proton has also upgraded the instrument panel, giving it a new design, but the numbering on the meters, they are a bit too small, so if you're looking at it while driving at a quick glance, you might miss it. Still, I would pick the Proton Iriz when it comes to crash safety. One of the reasons behind that is a material called hot press forming. Now, this material is used at certain sections of the car to make it stronger when it comes to a crash. The other reason is that the Proton Iriz comes with something called impact sensing door locks, which will automatically unlock the car in case you get into a crash. So it's easier for you to get out of the car or to be taken out.
All three cars have 6 airbags and electronic stability control, all as standard. But the Myvi is the only one to have autonomous emergency braking. Yes, it may only work at up to 30 kilometers per hour, but hey, it's better than nothing, right?
And listen!
The downside is having cameras right there does mean that if you do need to replace the whole windscreen, you have to bring it back to Perodua to recalibrate them. So guys, please check windscreen coverage for your car insurance. What I do love is the built-in Smart Tag reader, complete with a balance display and a top-up reminder. I think that's genius. What's not so great is the eco-idle start-stop system. Yes, it can save you a little bit of fuel here and there, but having the engine turn on and off all the time can get really annoying really quickly. It's the first thing that I turn off when I get into the car. Last but not least, the Myvi is the only one to give you a full-size spare tyre instead of space savers. And not only that, you also get a full-size alloy wheel. Now that's convenient.
Okay boys, time to pick a winner.
So at the beginning of the video, we asked the question, should the Myvi be the default choice for all Malaysians? Well, the answer is not so simple.
Our take is it should not be your only option because there are alternatives. 2 very good ones actually. The Kia Picanto especially may only be an A segmenter, but it still manages to offer the best refinement, best ride comfort and build quality.
The same goes for the Proton Iriz as well. It may not be brand new, but the 2017 update actually made it a significantly better car than it was before. Plus, it handles the best in this group, no doubts about that.
So where does that leave the Perodua Myvi? Well, that would be on top of our list. Now, the Perodua Myvi deserves every bit of its success because it is a big leap forward for Perodua. Now, at the end of the day, good looks and fun handling, well, that caters to a certain group of people only. With the Perodua Myvi, you have very good fuel economy, you have ample space, and you have Perodua's very dependable brand image, which caters to everyone else, right?
So for all that, the Perodua Myvi is the best, most complete car here. So, where does that leave the other 2 cars, Matt?
Well, as much as I like the Iriz, I think it's really starting to show its age right here, especially if you put it against these 2. It's still very much a relevant option for you to consider if you enjoy driving, but for those of you who want to get from point A to point B, these 2 are the better options.
Yep. So the Kia Picanto falls in between the 2 local cars. It may be very small inside, but it's still a very good option, I think, for youngsters who want to be different. And let's not forget, it's the cheapest car here.
So it's settled then. The Myvi comes out on top, but don't discount the other 2.
I hope you've enjoyed watching this episode of Driven, powered by Petronas Primax. Thank you so much for watching. We will see you in the next one.